Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Denicia Hilton here with me. So glad to have you again on the podcast. I don't think this is the first time you've been on the podcast.
I know. I was like, is it the podcast or was it your Facebook Lives? Like, we talk so much that I'm like,
yeah, you were on a couple of my summits, I think two of my summits. And I think you were on the podcast once or maybe more times to talk about the summit and other things. And I'm just so glad you're here. I feel like our work is very interwoven and mutually supportive, and I love collaborating with you. So thank you so much for joining me again.
Okay.
So for listeners who might not have seen or heard any of your prior interviews here, could you introduce yourself a little bit more and let everyone know the kind of work you do? And we're excited to share about your summit that's coming up. So I would love for you to introduce that as well.
Awesome. Sure. And actually, since that time of your summits and whatnot, things have really changed. So
I'd love to hear about that too.
It's kind of like an introduction of really who you are right now.
Exactly.
And who I am right now. I actually have had my formal training in acupuncture and oriental medicine. And I want to say that's really where it helped catapult me into women's health and really learning what's healthy versus what we've accepted as normal. And I've since then have really expanded it from just working with women and teens in the treatment aspect into really seeing what I saw was missing, which was on menstrual health education. And that led me down, okay, why is this happening? Where is this happening? Where we're completely neglecting the importance of this education from a holistic perspective. And that led me to, this is what I call period bypassing. And that's happening in all these different areas and industries. So then the answer is to educate. So then now it's led me into offering workshops and mentorships to teach the menstrual cycle from a holistic perspective. And at the same time, I still work one-on-one for those that really want to work and actually identifying where they need the support, and then we start to work on their path of getting that for them to have the healthy cycle and healthy fertility. So really, I find that the core of what we do, and like I know you understand this, and so it's like the core of it is that while it's like we look at the menstrual cycle as our tool and we look at the menstrual cycle as our guide, but really what's happening is that it's this transformation of women that are coming into themselves and actually feeling okay with being who they are and expressing their authentic beings. And we see that expression, like we see that congruence and that alignment of that expression in the menstrual cycle. So should the cycle being a healthy manifestation, then we know, great, she's in alignment with who she is. And to help hold that space and be that guide for her into discovering that authentic self and to express that in a way that is in alignment with herself is so empowering and so inspirational, and to be there in observance as I work with them and as I see them, whether it's in an audience speaking at an event, or if it's in the mentorship and we're doing our talking time, or if it's on a podcast episode, and like seeing these transformations just from having the conversation around holistic menstrual health is like, it's huge because we know that what we do with one is going to permeate in all these other areas of our life and affect many.
Wow. So you said a lot there. I can really hear how you're developing your authentic self and your authentic mission. And it sounds like this period bypassing summit that's coming up is sort of a big step on your journey of expressing fully your own authentic self in your work. And I would love to hear about that from your personal perspective and how that relates to your own menstrual health. Like you said all this about what you're observing in your clients, and I just know from my own experience that my experience of my own healing process is the foundation upon which I have anything to offer my clients. And so I'm curious to hear about that. How's your foundation doing? How have you discovered what you just talked about with your clients in your own process?
Yes. So yeah, that's a doozy.
That's a doozy.
Yeah. Cause so in my own, and I'm sure you might, I wonder if you see this too. Like, yeah, it's also a reflection. Like we're able to see these in other women, because we have experienced it like
Mhm.
somewhere. Right. So, my experience with being bypassed was when I was younger and going off to college, and it was pretty much like, okay, your mom wants to put you in birth control. And I'm like, oh gosh, really? And whatever, what are my options? Like, and so that's like period bypass alert number one, that I just accepted it, didn't really question it. And then, so my doc's like, okay, well, here you have the shot, or you can do the patch, or you can do the pill. And I was like, ugh, okay. Well, we know I don't really care for needles and shots like that, even though I'm an acupuncturist. I know there's different needles now. So totally different needles. But like, like we're not doing that one. And then that was like the patch thing. What? Change that every week. Okay, I guess I can do that. Like that was the extent. So that was like period bypass alert number two. And that I wasn't fully informed of potential repercussions, or things to look out for if it wasn't, if the birth control, that form of birth control was not for me. Right. So then like you fast forward some time of using that, and then I discover a breast lump, and then had surgeries for that, and because it started spreading, and so fortunately that's all that I needed, and then had series of follow-ups to ensure that I wasn't going to come back, or anything like that. But then I learned from another experience, whoa, like actually, I think I am sensitive to this, because I'm hearing this story from a teacher of his wife passing from the same rare tumor, which actually grew and got worse and took over her whole body system due to synthetic hormones to manage her menopause. And so then it was an instantaneous, oh my gosh, the patch. Like I was totally exposed, right? And so then that was like a turning point, and that was a shift for me. And so then now more recently, to move beyond like the experience, like this is what had happened, but to move beyond that, it was like, what really is happening? What is really about this that's getting to me? And it's the whole, why don't people think that they have to tell me this information? Like, and then also, why are you not telling me this to empower me to make my own decision? Instead of like, it seems like you're making a decision, but really they're setting the stage for you to follow along with what they'd want you to do anyway. And then also just myself not being encouraged, or supported to ask those questions, or to be taught what questions to ask, or like to be more aware of myself, like to be more aware of my body itself, and then also having those boundaries and whatnot. And so like to see that from that perspective is what really is the heart of the bypassing. And it's because like we're I feel like we're not going to teach it. We don't want to teach about menstrual health education. We don't want to do it, because if I were to be taught it, then holy smokes, the power that would come, right? Like the power of the voice, and the power of standing on my own, and standing for what it is that I would like to have and what I would like to see. And so instead, it's like, let's present this, so then that way we can just kind of cover it up. I had a bout with depression at that time too. Didn't even realize until much later on, like, oh, there's a higher incidence of depression when you're using hormonal birth control. And then, this huge trend right now on mental health. And I'm like, how many people are actually asking what was the use of hormonal birth control? And then, especially when they're talking about our teens, and that's such a huge issue with our teens. And even when I explore into those conversations with other practitioners or therapists, and I'm like, are we looking at their menstrual cycles? Are you guys including that? Do they think that they're depressed or that they're anxious only because they don't know what's happening during their cycle? And so, and then also you're trying to like push everyone, and social media has made it easier for you to compare, and it's like you're putting and creating these boxes. So now are we pushing them to be in this box or to have these titles and have these labels, and they're not comfortable with that, and so they're really frustrated, and it's creating a cacophony of mental health issues, right? And so, but
And
you're neglecting.
yeah, and it sounds like you had your own experience of all of those things that you're
Exactly.
describing, that being pushed into certain boxes, being led down this path without being given all the proper information to make informed decisions about your own health and well-being, and which then created all of these mental health problems for you, and
Right.
this connection with your own power. And
And it's a disconnection from yourself,
mhm.
right? Like if you're not taught completely about what is happening with you yourself, a rift and a dissociation was created. And so then you're continuing, now you think like something really is wrong with me. So then we have a culture of, let me search and find out what's wrong with me, where I'm like, can we create a culture of what's right with me?
Mhm. Well, the thing is, Denicia, it's what I mentioned at the very beginning is this whole thing with period bypassing and sort of suppressing information about the importance of our menstrual cycles, which is the norm in our society right now, and the whole belief system of the shamefulness and the secrecy and all of that around women's reproductive well-being. Uh, that alone is traumatic.
Oh yeah.
And all of these symptoms that you're discussing with the mental health and the dissociation from the self, that is what happens when someone is traumatized. And this period bypassing, I feel, is, if we don't really go back to the birth moment or the conception moment when there were these other initial traumas, uh, if we just say, okay, once the person's born and say they don't even have any traumas in their childhood, they have a happy family and all of that, for many women, young girls, that moment of menarche when suddenly they're bleeding and they don't have all the information. I mean, when you're bleeding, that's like number one priority.
Yeah.
And if you don't have all the information about your body bleeding and what it's about, especially for women in reproductive health, and that is traumatic by itself.
Hmm.
And then all the things that come out of that, with not having all the information about the fertility, all of these unhealthy ways that women's fertility is trying to be controlled, um, so that men don't have to take any responsibility for their fertility. So
Right.
all the burden of the responsibility for fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing, even though it's a thing that happens in partnership, the whole burden of that responsibility is piled on the woman, and any things that go wrong, it's all piled on her, right? So all of this is just one trauma experience after the other, oftentimes that we just don't even acknowledge as emotionally traumatic.
Right.
Right. I mean, I just tell the story time and again about my mother who didn't know about menstruation at all growing up in a Catholic home where all of that was shameful and secret. And started bleeding at the age of 10, which was sooner than they would have had anything in school or that her mother would have ever considered. I mean, her mother would probably never talk to her, really. I mean, she says she planned to, but she might never have really talked to her or shared with her because of all the shame and secrecy about it. And so here's a 10-year-old who starts to bleed.
Yeah.
From her nether regions, from her vagina, and she thinks she's going to die. How traumatic is that for a 10-year-old to think she's gonna die? And for however long, however many days or even weeks, she's going to school wearing multiple pairs of underwear because she thinks she's gonna die and she doesn't feel safe or she to talk to her mother about it. She doesn't even feel safe to talk to her mother about it or a teacher or anything. It's because there's so much shame around it. That alone is just traumatic. And it doesn't have to be a huge accident or a huge, assault to have the same kind of, PTS syndromes, right? Traumatic stress types of struggles and suffering that happens for people because trauma creates a certain way of being in the body and puts our nervous system into chronic fight and flight mode. And we're only just starting to figure out how to resolve that and heal that. And that, I feel, is the source of so much mental illness, because our body goes into trauma response and repeats these trauma loops. And recognizing that period, that initial period bypass that even started when we were conceived and when we were born, it's not just period bypass, it's bypassing feminine reproductive process.
Yeah.
Period.
There was like something too that I was that just clicked as well, is that when we associate like bleeding, right? Like anytime you see blood, it's usually an accident. It's usually an accident, or it would be like intentional in that there might have been surgery or something, and then you're having to change the dressings. And so here you are saying, well, we're expecting you to bleed, right? But then the thing is that if all before that had happened, it may have been an accident, like a trip and a fall. It was completely unexpected. And then everybody's shocked, like, oh my gosh, you cut yourself. Let me give you that Band-Aid, or, oh, let me kiss it and make it better and make it go away. So imagine you start bleeding when you're supposed to, and it's like, oh, let me make it go away. Like, let me give you more Band-Aids to make it go away. If that was even the case, like, right. So then, you do go, it's like you already have that programming. So whenever you see blood, in that everybody tends to flip out, right?
Exactly.
And everybody's wanting to clean it up, and everybody's wanting to cover it up, and then like
stop it from bleeding,
crying,
right?
Right. And so then you see that when you start menstruating, it's like I'm not quite sure what the updated numbers are now. But I know that like tampon use was number one for the longest time. And so, yeah, let's clog it up. Let's plug it up. And that's another way they were just going to like not see it and not like embrace it at all. And so it's kind of like, well, if you teach someone that it's a cumbersome and that it's in the way, then that's how they're going to expect to see it, and that's how they're going to experience it. And so it's like, that's that importance of that initial, and I don't even want to say conversation, because now I'm exploring this since having some recent conversations with people. Because then it's like, you don't even have to converse about it. Your actions are actually speaking louder anyway. And oftentimes the actions are shown and being recorded before you even decide you want to say anything about about the menstrual cycle itself anyway. So it's like all the nonverbals is happening. So your discomfort about engaging in the verbal aspects of it is there, but you're already communicating nonverbally about how it is that she needs to feel, or how it is that she needs to perceive her menstrual cycle. And it's valuing that aspect. And I mean, even so, to actually go into what the summit is, I'm sure people are like, what about this summit? Like, we never really talked about it. But I mean, this summit is pretty much like just what we're doing right now, which is having these conversations, like shedding the light on the bypassing that has occurred and is occurring in different areas, and beyond what actually is or has been happening, but like, how is that changing? Like, how did that change these guests that are joining in on the Period Bypass Online Summit? Like, how did that change them? And talking about that, and beyond changing them, but how did it move them to be the expression that they are now, whether that's through their business in the way that they are, or whether that's in the company that they are working in, or their volunteer work. Like, how did that change them to be who they are? And then understanding that while we are working on ourselves and ourselves are evolving, we do have that connection to people that are all around us, some and many that we don't know. So like, how it is that their work and how it is that them being who they are is affecting our greater humanity. So that's really what the summit is about, is sharing that story, sharing that transformation of moving from the bypassing and saying, no, I'm not bypassing anymore. And this is why it's happening. And I'm moving more in alignment with who I am and my true expression. And what does that mean? What does that really look like? So it's really cool to see that. It's been really interesting to have conversations with all the different guests, and getting their perspectives, and whether that's in parenting, or whether that's in the school system, like at a middle school, or whether that's like you, because you're one of the guest speakers, and how it is that when you learned about this, in really becoming into that space of embracing your cycle, and then how that's manifested in the way that you operate your business and provide services for other women. Like, it runs the gamut of who's actually engaging in the conversation, which is amazing, because period bypassing literally is occurring everywhere. So it's like really cool to see the diversity of those that are joining in, just in it, because I know that the more that we talk about it, the more that it is that we can really shake some things up and get people to really understand the value of teaching the menstrual cycle and really appreciating it from all sides.
Yeah, and it sounds like, you had these initial beginnings of some pretty heavy duty period bypassing, of saying, oh, just put her on birth control. We're not going to give her any information. And I mean, people are unconsciously doing this because that's what was done when they were growing up. And that's the consensual reality that we have right now.
And that's the medical providers, what they're used to as well, because
Exactly.
that's just what they're taught.
And nobody's consciously trying to suppress young women coming into discovery of their authentic self by doing this. They're just not, they're just not aware that that's what they're actually doing by not educating women fully about their whole thing. And so that's the big point of this, is what I'm hearing you share, and what you're discovering is this connection between women's authentic self and me too. I've been discovering this too, and our sole purpose and our power sits right in our wombs and is expressed in one way by our menstrual health, or our menstrual health is a communication about how we are in alignment with our authentic self. And It sounds like what you're experiencing in your practice is that as women work through whatever they need to work through and do whatever healing practices they need to do to better their menstrual health, that right alongside that comes getting more in tune with their own authentic self. And it's like it goes hand in hand. It's inseparable. And that happens simultaneously, and you can't
Correct.
do one without the other.
Correct. Like it makes me think of a case like right now, actually, when you say that. It's because so as much as it is that someone may want to focus only on their menstrual cycle, like I've had one come in and she's like, I just want to focus on this. And I'm like, you can focus on that, but I'm going to tell you that whatever we do, you are a whole person. You are a whole person physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You manipulate one, you manipulate the others. So it's like, it's having that perspective and changing the way that you think, that like you're not fragmented, you are whole. And so when you begin to see that something may have called your attention, it's like that's just getting your attention because it's doing its job. That's the message. And so once you engage with that, and then you start to actually learn, okay, well, if that's a message that's coming from something else, and you surround yourself and you put yourself in that space where you might be supported to help in this whole transition and this processing, then you can do so. And so what'll happen is, like I was working with one, and I kept feeling like I was getting it was like layers upon layers and upon layers. And especially when it comes into fertility and if they're older, because a lot of patterns would have set by then. And so now you have someone coming in and they're like, well, I'm trying to get pregnant, and they're having problems. And so then you're sitting there and you're like you're peeling back these layers. And then at the same time, they're only going to allow you to do so much because that's their boundaries. And so you're working with their boundaries as they continue to trust you more and more through the process. And I kept feeling like there was something. I'm like, there's something that's there. There's something that's there. Something that's there. And then all of a sudden one day, that's when she comes in. And then I learned that there was a physical trauma. And not only was there a physical trauma, but that person had recently died. And so then it was even that, like, and then being there in that space, and then having to go, like, speaking about like what that really meant to her, like what was that connection like. And so a lot of the times I find that it is control as well. And it's almost like when you align with the cycle, I feel like it's like childbirth, right? Where once you align with the birthing process, so many describe it as it got easier. But the hardest part was actually letting go of that control. And so even when you're cycling, it's letting go, and really like embracing into what the cycle is doing. And that will help better your experience on a holistic level, and help move into alignment, because it's like moving, you're no longer being in the way. Like you're creating all of these things that you're saying should be there, but then those should be's are from a perspective of like a social construct of how many likes can I get? How many comments can I get? So it's still outwardly focused. And so when you can turn it in, it's like a different ball game.
Right. And what you're talking about makes me think of an understanding of how we work, and where we've been trained to put our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been trained that the only valid identity and way to control anything is with the 5% of our brain that's responsible for logical thinking.
Right.
And that's where we do all of that social stuff, and and have ideas about how things should be, and hierarchies of this is better than that, and this causes this and that causes that, and if I do this and control this, then I'll be in control of all of these other things. That's 5% of our brain, and yet we're trained to put all of our identity in how we think about things logically and only value that way of thinking.
Right.
And so, but there's a whole 95% of our brain, which includes the entire hind brain and all of our brain matter that's in our whole body, where there's more brain matter in our bellies and around our wombs than in our entire brain that's in our head. And there's this whole level of intelligence and a huge amount of our intelligence that we're completely bypassing, just like we bypass our periods, just like we bypass our whole
Fertility, birthing.
everything, because that's part of that whole 95% of our intelligence. And so when people want to control that whole huge other thing, part of our identity, with this 5% of the brain, that creates trouble, because that part of the brain does not have the tools, doesn't have the understanding, has no idea how the rest of our being works. And so that's where that idea of controlling things comes from. And so that's what we're letting go of, the idea that that way of thinking about things should be in control, that things should go from A to B to C, and there should be a logical progression. And that's what we have to let go of, because it's such a limited perspective, when our whole human self has all of this dreamy, visionary, spirit, soul connection and somatic body wisdom that, you know, isn't trying to make A to go to B to go to C in a certain time frame so we can be done by 5 p.m. on Friday evening and have a weekend, right? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work within linear time. And yet it has this amazing wisdom and intelligence that we can start to rest into. And frankly, I feel much safer and much more held and cared for when I rest into that aspect of my being than when I'm thinking I'm in control of things with my logical brain. And the more we practice healing modalities that remind us of that, or spiritual practices that remind us to let go of control, which what we're really saying is, don't try to work this out logically. Okay, your logical brain is just 5% of your intelligence, and it's not the right tool for this job right now. So the more we say, oh, this is the wrong tool for what we're doing, right? Let's put it back in the toolbox and let the right tools come out, right? And then, so it's not so much about letting go of control, it's more about letting go of the wrong tool for the job and recognizing all the other intelligence and tools that we have. So I just needed to articulate that, because what you were saying was really inspiring that that awareness to come. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, lovely. Well, listen, we probably need to wrap up. I know you have to get on the road. So could you give us some of the details about the Period Bypassing Summit that's coming up, and how people can sign up, when it's going to start, all that kind of good stuff?
Yes. So the online summit, the Period Bypassing Online Summit, is a free summit, and you can actually get notifications of when the videos are going live. Those are going to go live beginning, and I have it right here, August 18th. So, it'll be 8, 18, 19. They're going to start that week, and we're going to just literally, if you go to periodbypassing.com and just plug in your email, and we'll make sure that you get notifications of when those videos go live. And then also, as of right now, the live Q&A should take place the week of August 25th. So that way it gives you time to actually sit and watch the videos or listen to them. Really, really encouraging, as far as we can use and take in knowledge, right, into that logical 5% as much as possible. But then, really, what are you going to do with it? So, really encouraging you to listen to those and watch those videos, and come join us for a live Q&A with the speakers. And we'll actually have the specific dates and times will be sent to those that are that have already claimed their spot and list and everything else for this summit. And we really want it to be, like I said, an engaging conversation. So we understand that Sama and I are having this conversation, but it's even more powerful if we can have the conversation with anyone who's learning this may be new to them. And so we want to be there for you as you begin to actually walk in this path. And so we want to open up that door to be able to communicate with you and see how it is that any of the speakers can support you, and whichever way it is that you feel like you want to help with raising awareness around period bypassing, and then actually doing something about that. And what does that mean? So really, periodbypassing.com. You can go on there and just submit your email, and we'll make sure that you get all the updates as the videos begin to be released beginning August 18th.
2019. Okay, so I just have one more question about that. So I think you were telling me that the access for this summit is free from here on out. It's not one of those kind like my summits. It would be free for a limited period time, and then my summits, then if you wanted it to have access later on, you'd have to pay a small fee. And a lot of summits are that way. But you were telling me you wanted to make this free forever. So this is a forever free summit. So if listeners are hearing this and it's after August 2019, and they've missed the live part of it and the initial airing of it, can they still go to periodbypassing.com and access the summit? Will that be the same place to go?
Yes. So then the plan is that even when you go to periodbypassing.com, there will be a link or something that would actually say Summer of 2019 Summit. And that way you can go ahead and see any of the videos and listen to any of them. The benefit, as far as those that might listen to this right now, is the live Q&A part where, it's live. So I'm just saying that during that time of the original release, then we'll have those conversations and maybe you can actively participate. But if it's after that, for sure, you'll still have access to the videos and be able to take part that way. And who knows, maybe by then there's different ways that we can another community might have formed. And so then we can join in the conversation. And most of the speakers all had their contact information too. So if there was anyone that really tickled your fancy as far as really wanting to talk more with them about what it is that they're doing, then the contact information for everyone is also there and available.
Okay, and will you record the live Q&A so that even though people coming in later won't be able to ask their own live questions, they might still be able to watch the recording and see the questions and hear the questions other people asked and how they were answered? Will they be able to see the recording? Okay, great.
Yep, I will record those, yes.
All right, and add them to the summit offering. So this is a valuable resource, and it's a little revolution that we're having, and let's see how wide and far we can spread this awareness of how important it is for us all to stop period bypassing in whatever level that we're doing it, because we're bypassing our own core authentic nature and our ability to fully embody and live fully and fully express ourselves here on this planet and fully express our creative, unique life purpose and soul purpose here on this planet. And I could go on and on about this, and I'm sure you have a final message to welcome people to sign up for the summit and join in this period bypassing revolution.
Yes, I definitely would encourage, even if you're questioning it, like just go ahead and register for it and watch them, like just watch the videos or even listen to them. I know sometimes I'm a listener, even though it is a video. But even just being there because your curiosity has peaked and really, it may some question like it doesn't even apply to me. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some conversation that will definitely apply to you. And apply to you, but there might be other conversations that apply to those that are around you. So, it could be a grandchild, it could be a cousin, it could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be whomever. I mean, you as a parent that's like realizing what's happening when your child may go to school might start you to want to make sure, let me jump into my PTA, and we need to get this education here in our school, and for our girls and whatnot. So there's ways that, yes, definitely joining in with the whole revolution and the whole period bypassing movement, that something that you can do or that you might be inspired to do something is going to come out of it. So I would love to have you jump on board and even share with me, like, what were your takeaways? And that would be awesome. And I say this is the summer 2019 summit because I would love to see there to be more, so that we can have updates or invite new people and get new perspectives on what's going on in different places around the world, and at a different time, because we know times are relevant. So like what's going to happen then? So I really see that this is something that is going to be huge, and it is huge. And so to really come in and join in on the movement, I welcome you to come and do so. And all it takes is for you to go to periodbypassing.com and sign up.
Yay. So please go there now. Sign up for Period Bypassing Summit at periodbypassing.com. And thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast, Denicia, to share about the summit. Looking forward to it myself. And thanks, listeners, for listening to us share about it. And that's all for now. We'll see you soon.